Scattered across northern Scotland, over 350 stone monuments stand carved with symbols no one can fully decipher. They were left by the Picts, a civilization that humiliated Rome's legions, ruled for 6 centuries, then seemingly vanished without a trace. For generations, no one could explain how an entire people simply disappeared. Now, ancient DNA from their graves reveals that we had the Picts wrong. They never vanished. From the low hills of Aberdeenshire to the wind-battered coast of Moray, the land itself is marked by the presence of the Picts. Their carved stones, more than 350 in number, rise from churchyards, fields, and ancient crossroads, each one a silent witness to a society rooted in place. These monuments are not scattered at random. They cluster along natural corridors, the River Dee, the fertile valleys of Angus, and the old coastal routes that once linked settlements from Fife to the far north. The stones track the paths people traveled, traded, and fought along, standing as markers of territory and memory. The variety is striking. At Aberlemno, a single stone bears the double disc and Z-rod, a motif repeated in distant corners of Pickland but paired with different companions, sometimes a crescent, sometimes a beast, sometimes a mirror and comb. Each combination hints at a local story, a clan, or a claim to land. The symbols themselves, over 30 recurring motifs, form a visual language that is both regional and connected. In eastern Scotland, Class 1 stones show incised symbols on rough slabs, untouched by Christian imagery. Further north and west, Class 2 stones appear, shaped and carved with both Pictish motifs and the cross, revealing a society in transition. The stones are not confined to the elite. In places like Port Mahomack, a monastic settlement flourished alongside symbol stones and burial grounds, suggesting layers of meaning and use. Some stones stand alone on windswept moors. Others are grouped in churchyards, repurposed as grave markers or boundary posts. The sheer density and diversity of these monuments, each rooted in the local geography, speak to a people who shaped and were shaped by the land they called home. By the 19th century, the Picts had become a blank canvas for speculation. With no written records of their own and a landscape littered with enigmatic stones, Victorian scholars filled the silence with theories. John Pinkerton, writing in 1789, insisted the Picts were a pre-Celtic Aboriginal race, a mysterious people who survived from the Stone Age, untouched by later migrations. Pinkerton's idea fit neatly into the racial taxonomies of his time, which tried to sort ancient Britons into rigid categories: Nordic, Alpine, Mediterranean, each with its own supposed temperament and destiny. William Forbes Skene, a generation later, looked to the medieval king lists and found what he thought was evidence for a society ruled through the mother's line. Skene popularized the image of the Picts as matrilineal outliers, a people whose kingship passed from uncle to nephew, not father to son. His arguments, rooted in a selective reading of Gaelic chronicles, gave the Picts a reputation for social strangeness that would linger for decades. Then came the Scandinavian migration story. As Norse archaeology gained ground, some historians cast the Picts as migrants from the North Sea, kin to the Vikings, or even as a lost Scandinavian colony. This theory painted the Picts as outsiders, their symbol stones reinterpreted as echoes of far-off runes and sagas. The final twist was the narrative of destruction. By the early 20th century, it was common to suggest that the Picts had been wiped out by Viking invaders, a people erased by violence, their culture obliterated, their bloodline lost. Each of these myths, Aboriginals, matrilineal monarchs, Scandinavian migrants, and victims of genocide, shaped how the Picts were studied, remembered, and imagined, but none would withstand the evidence that was about to surface from the soil itself. Massive stone ramparts still crown the headland at Dunacair, battered by North Sea winds, but standing after more than 15 centuries. Beneath their weathered faces, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of repeated rebuilding, timbers charred and replaced, ramparts thickened, new defenses raised as threats evolved. The fort's occupation stretches from the late Iron Age through the Pictish era, with radiocarbon dates clustering from the 3rd to the 7th centuries Common Era. Each phase leaves behind a layer of burnt clay and shattered stone. the scars of siege and recovery. This pattern is not isolated. Across Pictland, hill forts like Berghead and Craigfadrig show similar histories. Walls torn down and rebuilt, gates reinforced, workshops expanded. At Loch Kinord, slag heaps from iron smelting pile up beside the remains of a crannog, an artificial island built for protection. The volume of slag points to generations of blacksmiths working in the same place, producing tools, weapons, and ornaments that link the Pictish world to its Iron Age roots. These layers of repair and reuse reveal remarkable resilience. Dr. Jane Graham describes these sites as living records of resilience. She points to the craft evidence, fragments of glass, pins, and intricately decorated metalwork that appear in both pre-Pictish and Pictish layers. The same hands that shaped defensive walls also carved symbols into stone, marking territory and memory. The distribution of these symbols is not random. They cluster around strongholds, along river valleys, and at crossroads, mapping a network of defended communities that endured for centuries. The defensive architecture, craft traditions, and the careful placement of symbol stones all point to a society that adapted but never broke. The physical continuity in their settlements sets the expectation: if the people remained, their biological legacy should be visible too, waiting to be revealed by the next layer of evidence. In a sterile laboratory far from the windswept stones of Aberdeenshire, the story of the Picts is being rewritten, not by legend, but by numbers. Adeline Morez and her team at Liverpool John Moores University worked with bone fragments from Pictish-era burials, most notably petrous bones from Lundin Links, a site that yielded some of the highest quality ancient DNA in Britain to date. After months of extraction and sequencing, the genomes were run through principal component analysis and plotted against a reference map of British and European populations spanning the Iron Age to the medieval period. The data are unequivocal. Pictish individuals align almost perfectly with the Iron Age British cluster. The fixation index FST between Pictish and Iron Age samples hovers at just 0.0015, a figure so low it falls within the range of modern regional variation in northeast Scotland. Admixture modeling reveals that over 90% of Pictish ancestry is inherited directly from local Iron Age populations. Any detectable Anglo-Saxon or early Scandinavian input is minimal, below 5%, and largely absent from the core Pictish heartlands during the 5th to 8th centuries. The only spike in foreign ancestry appears later in the island cemeteries of Orkney and Shetland, where Viking-related DNA rises sharply after 800 CE. Adeline Morez appears on camera, laying out the evidence. No trace of a mass migration, no genetic signal for a vanished or replaced people. The myth of a mysterious foreign Pictish race collapses under the weight of these results. Yet she cautions that every dataset has its limits. The remains analyzed come mostly from high-status burials, elites who may not represent every layer of Pictish society. Coverage is still too low to resolve every fine-scale haplogroup or to pinpoint exactly when minor admixture events occurred. But the core message is clear. The Picts were not outsiders. They were, in every genetic sense, the direct descendants of the Iron Age Britons who shaped the land long before Rome, long before the Vikings, and long before their own name faded from history. In the middle of the 9th century, the Chronicle of the Kings of Alba records a king named Kenneth MacAlpin, not as a foreign conqueror, but as the first to rule both the Picts and the Scots. The language of the Chronicle is telling. It speaks of unification, not extinction. Professor James Fraser points to this wording as evidence for a political merger, not a population replacement. The shift is visible in the names written across the land. Old Pictish place names beginning with Aber, like Aberdeen and Abernethy, gradually give way to Gaelic forms starting with Inver, such as Inverness. This change in toponyms echoes the adoption of Gaelic law and the disappearance of the Pictish language from legal texts. Yet, as Fraser notes, the people themselves did not vanish. The records show a rebranding, a kingdom called Alba, a new elite, but the same communities living on the same soil. The story is one of continuity beneath a changing name. On a quiet farm outside Cullen, Eileen MacLeod holds a printout from her latest DNA test. The report highlights a rare Highland haplogroup, a genetic signature that echoes the ancient profiles found in Pictish-era burials. For Eileen, the connection is more than a statistic. It is a thread running through her family's stories, linking her to the painted people whose stones still dot the fields nearby. In Fife, university students compare their ancestry breakdowns, surprised to find that the so-called Pictish component on commercial tests matches the same northeast cluster identified in academic studies. Regional charts show that modern Aberdeenshire, Angus, and Fife residents share more identity by descent with Pictish genomes than with any other group in Britain. These numbers, once abstract, become personal when paired with local voices. The past isn't lost. It is living in the faces and families of the Northeast, carried quietly in the DNA of those who call this land home. Myth and mystery once obscured the Picts, but DNA leaves no room for legend. No lost race, no invasion, just a people whose story never broke. Today, millions of Scots, especially in the Northeast, carry that legacy in their genes. Disappearance is a myth. Continuity is the truth.